I'm gonna open up a snare or a kick drum just in the sounds right now, so we can hear one. And I'll we'll look at the waveform, and I'll show you what I mean. Um, we'll just drag a kick into here real quick. It doesn't really matter what it is. Cool. Yeah, so you can see right from this waveform that it has this really steep transient right in the beginning that's kind of clicky, and then has a really long tail afterwards. And we can see this with pretty much any kind of kick drum that we pull in here. And you can also notice that most of these look very much like a sound wave or a sine wave, right? Um, really long waveform. So we're gonna try and replicate this exact type of thing in operator. So we'll pull up operator, and first thing we want to do is kind of take this and pull it down. This is your sustain. You can see it's right here too, the sustain. And that's just because if we have it up here, then it goes on forever, right? But if we pull it down, then it has this nice sound like that. So also pull in the decay too, because otherwise it'll be way too long. And kick drums are nice and short. So the second thing we'll do is we'll come over here to this pitch envelope. And this will kind of determine a lot of the sound characteristics of our bass drum. We'll pull this up with the initial attack, and then okay, so first we need to pull this all the way up. Alright, so you can hear that it's got this like boom boom, which really is like, if you think of any kind of tom or drum, any kind of big drum, it has like a doom doom kind of sound. So that's why we're using this pitch envelope. And if we pull it in, cool. So you can hear that kind of sound too. You don't have to have this all the way up. A lot of these things are to taste too. Cool. Also, I'm going to change the amp envelope to fixed. There we go. That way we can kind of shoot for that frequency of the bass drum. You don't have to do it this way. And if you do go to fixed, then that means that you can't change what pitch your kick drum is going to be at later. But that's okay for us for now. Cool. Next thing we're going to do is put a filter on it. We're going to come to this filter, and I like to use the OSR filter, and this is going to let us like give a little bit of drive, or we'll change the shape to we'll put on hard, why not? There we go. And this kind of gives it more of a dirtier sound and gives it a little more fullness. You can turn the resonance up a little bit. That sounds a little echoey. Cool. That sounds a lot better. Yeah, and so what you want to avoid when you're doing this though is making it sound too clicky in the beginning. Just find a nice balance between all of these different parameters. Maybe a little spread. Nice, that's a good start. So, cool. Now we can go into some of the processing for this sound. I'm going to start with a saturator. Throw that in. Give it a little drive. Already you can kind of, you hear more of the transient now from this sound. I'm going to adjust the bass to give it some other types of, like, I don't know, trance, EDM style qualities too. You can change these settings as well, what kind of curves you want. I'm just going to leave mine on analog. Soft clipping too. It's also a nice thing. And then you have your own dry wet knob here to decide how much saturation you really want to add to your kick drum sound. Cool. That's a good start. So the next thing we're going to do is add a loop compressor onto it. This is going to help us help us kind of control the amount of sound we want out of it. Nice. And then something that's really going to help us in shaping this sound is a multi-band compressor. What's nice with the multi-band compressor is that you can compress certain dynamics of it, and it kind of acts a little bit as an EQ in a way. So we're gonna adjust the ratio there and pull it in. Oops, I was doing the wrong one. And you can see right here too, underneath, that it gives us a little, like right when you press the note, it tells you how much dB you've pulled off of it, and you kind of want to shoot to put back that amount of dB afterwards. So I actually don't want to do, I want to do more around, yeah, the 18 area, and then I'll put back in, there we go. Put out the output here a little bit too. And of course, because it's a bass drum, we're going to get these low frequencies as well. That's 10. Cool. And this also has like a dry wet knob too with the amount here. Excellent. Cool. I'm actually going to go and pull down the frequency a little bit more. Nice. Okay, cool. And of course, we're going to want to put an actual EQ on this as well. Change this to a low pass filter. Again, this is all a taste. I'm not telling you exactly how you should be EQing your bass drum, and really, you don't want every time you put in a bass drum to be the exact same sound anyway. Just something to kind of mess around with until you find, really you should be making a bunch of these and deciding what ones work for you. Cool. So now we're going to get into, like, these are pretty basic things for making a lot of different sounds, like percussive type sounds in your synthesizer. But specifically for the drums right now, we want to focus on these two. I'm going to go to drum bus, add that in. And this has crunch and boom, which really change what kind of sound you want. And you can see I'm clipping here, so I'm just going to throw a limiter on the end too. Cool. I don't like that. Cool. And you can also adjust the transients here too. Nice. Now we're getting a lot more of that. The kind of clicky sound at the beginning. Cool. All right. So first one was drum bus, and now we're going to throw on corpus as well. And we want to put that before our limiter. So the thing about corpus is essentially a resonator, and it has a bunch of different types of resonators: beam, marimba, string, whatever. But for us, we want to use membrane because drums are essentially a membrane instrument. It's just a like, you know, the first drums are literally just animal hide, an animal skin stretched out. So we want to use membrane, and this will, okay. So we can change this parameter here for material, like how much material is going to get into there, the ratio, and the tuning of it. We can also apply a filter as well to kind of pull out the frequencies we want to get. If we pull it up here, we'll get more of the brighter frequencies. If we get down here, then we'll accentuate the frequency of where a drum actually is. And this has a dry wet knob as well. Cool. So yeah, so now we want to group all of this together. Cool. Because we want to be able to control some of these parameters. So we're going to come here to the instrument rack, and then we'll be able to control like the pitch envelope to which will now be our actual frequency because we made this fixed. Here we go. Okay. To the macro. And we can do some mapping. So here we go. Map to macro 1. And now we have the pitch amount on there. And we really don't want it below 100. Like, we don't want it below 0 at all. And so the way to change that is to go up to map right here. Change the minimum to 0. And that'll make it so that our knob will never go below 0. And now we have some control over how much pitch is affecting this kick drum. Cool. We also can map this time control, which is essentially going to control all of our envelope times at once. And this one, that's fine. We can keep it below 0 if we want. But yeah, you can hear that it's like, actually, not only is it affecting this envelope, but it's affecting this envelope and this envelope. It's literally all of them is the time knob right here. So we're just going to, yeah, that sounds pretty good. The last thing that we'll do is we can map this level as well, the level of our actual amplitude envelope, because this will decide how much is going to, like, this is going through a glue compressor and then a multi-band compressor and then a limiter, and this affects how much level we want to actually send into those. And having that controllable is a really nice thing. Cool, and then you can go through and be like, kind of change these. So I want to just make this pitch. Time is fine, but I guess we can just call this envelope. That looks weird with the E there. I'm just going to make it like this. And then we'll just change this to like volume. And if you want, you can, like, you know, give it different colors too. It's a little helpful when you're doing this live or something to be able to easily differentiate which ones are which. Cool. So now we have this cool bass drum. And at this point we can like save it. I'm gonna call it kick 1. And that's our instrument rack, and then later we can throw this into our drum rack as well. And that is basically how you do a kick drum. So to recap, you start with your oscillator, and we're looking for a high transient with a long tail. We want to, we can put it on fixed frequency because really we're going to change it with the pitch envelope anyway. Our envelope started like this. We want to bring down our sustain all the way and bring in our decay to around this amount of, I don't know, I'd probably say between 200 and probably like 400 actually is what you want. And then we'll come to the pitch envelope and adjust that, turn it on, filter, and then for processing we use a saturator, glue compressor, multi-band dynamics, EQing, drum bus, and corpus, and limiter. And these are all things that these are not third-party plugins at all. These are all plugins that just come straight with Ableton, so anybody can access and use these. Cool. So that is a pretty solid sounding kick drum. All right, nice. So now we're gonna look at snare drums. And snare drums follow a lot of the same process, but they are a little more complicated. We'll do the same thing first. I'll show you some snare hits so we can kind of look at the waveform. So kind of the same thing, except there's a fair bit of noise in this. You can see it also has a high transient and long tail, but it's a lot more jagged in what is going on? Why is weird? Okay. And there's also two parts of this of the snare drum. So snare drum, it sounds different than any other type of drum because of the snares. It has literally long metal. We call them snares. They're basically like jagged wires on the bottom head of the snare, and this gives it that noise, that noisy snare sound. Instead of a doom sound, it has a but it still does because it has a top and a bottom membrane. It still actually has a doom sound. It's just kind of covered up by the noise, but we still want to have that doom sound coming through in this. So really, we're gonna do a process that combines both the noise aspect and the membrane aspect, and we're gonna do that in Operator. So first, we're gonna do a pretty similar thing to what we did with our bass drum. We're gonna do a fixed level again, fixed frequency. Really, snare drums, you don't really want. It makes a lot more sense to have a fixed frequency with a snare drum than a kick drum. You don't really want to be messing around with the frequency that you're getting from that. So we'll keep it fixed, and really, this needs to be probably somewhere in between 200 and 300 hertz is fine. And we'll pull down our sustain all the way, bring in our decay. So we have this nice clicky sound like we did with our kick drum. And once you're happy with, your frequency and how long it's going, then the next thing we want to do is immediately put this into an instrument rack, because we want to have first our membrane sound and second our noise sound. So I'm gonna create another operator here. I'm gonna rename this to membrane, rename this to noise. Cool. And so for the noise part, I like to do it this way because then we can not only separate out these two noises, but then we can mix how much it is going to be in the final sound. So for this, we're going to change our wave here from wave to noise white. And already you can hear now we have both the noise, the snare part, which is now the white noise, and the membrane part. And we'll look at the envelope. So our decay for our membrane is 276 milliseconds. We want the noise to be a little bit longer than that. Not super long, but we want it to outlast our membrane, because that's more what mimics a real snare drum. Cool. And we want this to be a little lower in volume too. And you can either change that from the level here, or you can change it from the level here as well. The snare drum, even more than the kick drum, is gonna be quite the balancing act between all these different knobs and processes to get the snare how you finally want it at the end. Cool. So yeah, at this point we can go into our audio effects processing. I'm gonna throw a little bit of reverb onto this sound, which is now different from what we did with the kick drum. You can definitely put reverb on your kick drum, or just like your whole drum channel in general, depending on what kind of music you're doing. But I like to add just like a little bit of kick drum or of reverb here. And you can play with a lot of these different settings to get it just how you want. For me, I like it pretty subtle at first. Cool. And we want this to actually go into our actual noise channel. We don't want it to affect our membrane channel, because that'll have different processes, and then we'll have processes affecting both of them at the end. Cool. This reverb just kind of levels out our noise so that it's not so grating of white noise. Cool. Then we could throw on a glue compressor. Cool. Just kind of balances that out and brings it in. Cool. You can put on utility too to bring it up. Nice. We'll throw on some EQ, just like we did with our kick drum. And really, we're kind of looking for more of these brighter frequencies, because they're just affecting the noise right now. Bring this down a little. Yeah, in general, your noise is going to be less, a lot less volume than your membrane is. Nice. Cool. And so now, what we can do is take all of these effects that we just made, put it into a subgroup for the noise, and we can add another chain of it. So basically right now, oops, I didn't want to copy it. We can create a chain. So now what we've effectively done is we have our own wet dry for the noise itself. We have our wet signal, which has all of the effects, and then we have our dry chain, which has nothing. So we have essentially two parts of we have wet dry, but this dry one is going to effectively be like our clap. This is more of our transient part than this is. This is more of our tail. So I'm going to rename this to clap, and this to, I mean, you can call these whatever you want. I'm just going to call it tail because that's what makes sense for me. Cool. So just to review this first part of the snare, we made a membrane part, in very much the same way we did the kick, and then we added we grouped it so we could make a noise part with white noise. And then we added reverb, glue compressor, utility, and EQing to that noise, to just the noise, not to the membrane. And then we grouped those together to create more of a transient. We have a clap and a tail now, which is more indicative of what a snare drum sounds like. Cool. All right, so now we can talk about the membrane processing that we want to do. And I just am going to throw saturator on it. kind of give it more. Cool. Yeah, you definitely want this membrane to have its own character. You don't want to skimp out on your membrane and just have noise, or else it's going to sound not like a real snare drum. You can also put the frequency so that it matches the frequency of your song as well. Not a bad idea. Okay. So, yeah, really not much processing that we want to do to the membrane specifically. We're going to adjust. We're going to process this whole thing. Okay, so let's just hide that for now. And so for processing the whole thing, we want to saturate again. Put some drive on it. Cool. And throw on a glue compressor. Alright. And just like with our other one, with our kick drum, we're going to throw on a drum bus. This really gives us some slap back and stuff, so I'm also going to turn down the drive on this glue compressor, on the saturator. Cool. Give it some crunch. Give it some boom. Nice. And we can put our multi-band dynamics on it. We definitely want to focus more on the mids and highs here. You can hear that this is also kind of an EQ. Jeez. Getting a lot out of that reverb right now, huh? I'm gonna go back actually and turn down that reverb. Seems like a little much for some reason. Maybe we can turn down this occasion. This pre-delay. That's what really was going on. There you go. That's way better. Okay. Back to this. Cool. And we can actually also put something you wouldn't really expect, a vocoder on it. So traditionally how a vocoder works is it synthesizes with another channel. And typically you would have like an external source like a voice channel and then put that into your synthesizer. But instead of that, we can just have noise because it's its internal oscillator. And this definitely gives us more of a electronic and enhanced snare sound. And you can shape like this is just like an EQ band, so you can shape like exactly how much like brightness and stuff you want. You can also adjust the dry wet in it. I also like to move the band sound to 4 because this gives us more of a lo-fi type of sound. Cool, I really like that. And lastly, we can throw corpus onto this as well to really mimic that membrane resonator. So the tune here should be some multiple of your actual frequency. So I'm going to go back to the instrument and the membrane, and our frequency is 228. And essentially, you want to have double that of frequency, so around 500, somewhere between 470 and 500-ish. And that is because of the overtone series. You can also do this a little bit by adding another operator thing in the instrument channel. We'll do that in a sec. So I'm going to add a filter to this as well. Filter these brighter frequencies. Turn up the dial it. Cool. I feel like I'm not really... Alright, cool. Awesome. Okay, cool. So yeah, why don't we add another operator to this as well. And I'll show you the overtone thing on this as well. So our membrane was 228, 456. So we'll go 456 here. Actually, I'm just going to type it in. Cool. Nice. And this should actually be a little lower than the membrane. Cool. And you could stop there too if you wanted to. But I also like to go and add a synth snare drum like sample to it too. Like just for the transient. So I'll take this, throw it in here, and then I will make it so that we're getting just the transient out of it. Maybe filter this too. Alright. So now we can take this whole thing and that, group it together, and save that as snare. Awesome. So the last thing we'll do is we will make another hi-hat with operator as well. And that's pretty simple. We just have our really short envelope, change this to white noise, make it really short. And there we go. You have your hi-hat. You can do things with the filter if you want, or even the pitch envelope. But yeah, essentially, hi-hats are pretty simple. I'm just not going to put the filter on there. Cool. I'll save this as hi-hat. Awesome. So now we'll make a drum rack and make a beat out of this. maybe it'll help if I spell it right. Here we go. Throw this here. Throw that there. Cool. I'll just make a pretty simple drum beat for us. See how that sounds. There you go, that sounds good. Over here. Nice, I like that. It sounds a little stale though. What I like to do, I'm gonna just record. Cool. So we have this, and we have that. And this is like fine, it's totally straight and everything. But what's really cool to do is to go to the core library to pull out grooves. Where's that? Here we go. So all these grooves will make it so that we can either change it to like any one of these types of genres really simply. So if you want it to be kind of a laid back, like a loose hip hop beat, then we just take that and drag it onto this. Or we can take this. Maybe it would help if we froze this too. Seems like it's eating up a lot of our CPU. Yeah, there we go. Alright, and there you have it. We made a hi-hat, we made a snare drum, we made a kick drum, all using operator and standard Ableton plugins. Okay,